Okay, good morning again. We have now completed the first of 3 sessions under Office Finance. We've looked at the overview and the basics, and you learned about what a balance sheet looks like, looking at the 2 sides of the balance sheet and the things you own and the things you owe. So that is something that changes on a daily basis and can be updated as frequently as infrequently as you want. I would say healthy practices look at that once a month for sure, and also look at trends over a quarter period of time. Now we're moving on to the second of 3 sessions that will be discussing basic finances for your business, and this is on the income statement and the cash flow statement. You are not going to fill out a cash flow statement per se, because essentially that's your checkbook register. And whether you keep it by paper or electronically, you're going to have a checking account for your business that the money goes into and you pay bills out of and you pay your personnel out of. And that is the information you'll need to have in order to provide essentially to your accountant. And he will create an income statement for you. So here again, we have a brief view, a need-to-know facts, a need-to-know applications. You'll need to review all that before you then go to quiz number 6, which is listed here. Make sure you've completed the prior ones, and then you'll be ready to complete this one. Once that quiz is done, you can go to this assignment, which, as you see, as we've become accustomed to, shows guidance about what you're going to be doing through these steps. You have a case. So here's Dr. Smith's practice. You're going to read about the practice, and then he has an income statement here. So you're going to now start learning what is an income statement. Essentially what he's reporting here, getting reported to him from his accountant, is over a period of time, and that can be 1 month, year to date, 3 months, a whole year, depends on how much data your accountant's gotten and how much you want to see. This looks like it's a 12-month period. So what you're looking at is the actual figures of what different expenses were within your practice. Some of these, as you see in this purple column, have an industry average. We know in dentistry that it's common for your employee expenses, that is the salaries that you pay your employees, to be around the 20% level. Actually, when they include benefits and hygiene salaries, they're in the 25 to 28% range. So here's employee expense, here's employee benefits, and here's hygiene salaries. So according to this, it could be as high as 31%, as low as 26%. If you combine all 3 of those. But it's giving you industry averages. You have picked your total gross. We did that in the first session that we had together about Office Finance. You also plugged that into your balance sheet area. And so now that you come here, you're going to take the total gross, you're going to divide it between the hygienist and the dentist, but this total will be the same that you had. And if you then calculate the percentage that are essentially listed here as averages, so somewhere in these ranges, you take this percentage value, multiply it by your total gross, and you're going to come up with monthly numbers for the expenses. Will every practice have an actual expense in every one of these categories? Not necessarily, but there's more than enough categories that you can get an idea of all the expenses that a practice could have. You can choose to fill out every single line with a number, but you at least need to have the lines that have an industry average with a number in them. So most all of these will be populated. You don't necessarily have to do all of them. And what it'll do for you then is it'll multiply it by 12 and come out here and give you an annual amount. So you've given yourself the expenses you would need on a monthly basis. It's going to calculate it on an annual basis, and you're going to come down here and say, my total expenses were $441,900. Well, what you need to look at and remember is that it's now going to convert this to a percentage. If this percentage that you get calculated here is too far off on the actual overhead percentage that you chose in the first session that we did on Office Finance, you're going to have to go back and adjust these numbers. So let's say you pick 70% as your overhead expense that you expected to have in your business that you created. This says it's 76%. Well, that's higher than what you actually picked. So you're going to have to go in here and figure out, how do I adjust these numbers? If you get down here and say it's 62% and you picked 70%, well, maybe it's not realistic in what some of your expenses are. So you're going to need to compare this overhead percentage that is generated by the numbers you put in and the calculations that are made, and make sure that it correlates within a percent or two at the most of the actual overhead that you picked, which I think your choices were 50, 60, 70, and 80%. So these numbers down here should be pretty round numbers and correlate to what you picked. Therefore, it's going to give you the difference, which is the profit percentage. And then it's going to take this total gross that you had already picked minus this overhead that you've now got corrected and correlated to the number you had, and tell you what your adjusted net income is. So this is how much money the business made, almost $140,000 after the overhead, which was 75%, was taken out of the amount of money that was collected. So there's an example. There's a way to read through this and better understand it so that then you're ready to take quiz 7. Once you've done that, you're ready to do your assignment, which is here. So you're essentially going to create this same form that you just reviewed. And you're going to go through and you're going to have your total gross here, which whatever it was that you picked. And then the numbers here, every line item, as I said, that's got an industry average, go through and list that. And you're going to come down here to an overhead percentage, and this needs to correlate. So if I picked 60% for my business here, then I've got expenses in here I'm going to have to change. If I pick 70%, well then maybe I beat it, but I'm going to have to do a little bit of adjusting because that's too far off from what I actually picked. So that's your second assignment here. Once again, the most important aspect I want you to remember is that at the end, when you've calculated your overhead in this statement, it needs to correlate within the 1 to 2% of what you actually picked. And once you've done all that, you want to remember to save it, and you will have finished the second assignment.